Welcome, everybody, to this Tabadlab Policy Roundtable, which is entitled Visible and Valued Gender Responsive Public Finance in Pakistan. Gender responsive budgeting is an approach to public financial management that assesses the differential impact of revenue and expenditure policies on women and men and restructures revenues and expenditures to promote gender equality. But more than this, it's an advocacy tool, which is a tool to push for greater spending on women and girls and aims to reduce the gender disparities that are existing at the moment and that, as we know, are entrenched and long-standing. So let's just go over what those disparities actually are. In the Global Gender Gap Index report, a report produced annually by the World Economic Forum, Pakistan is 148th out of 148 countries on gender parity. That means that the overall gender parity score is 56.7%. Equality, so to speak, would be 100%. Labor force participation has a gap of nearly 60 percentage points between men and women, with LFPR for men at 84% and for women at 26%. Literacy rate for women are 20 percentage points less than men. Primary school enrollment is similar, 10 percentage point differences. So advocacy for gender equality is badly needed. The conversation on gender responsive budgeting in Pakistan is not a new one. We've been having this conversation since the early 2000s at least. With the support of UN Women, UNDP, and other multilaterals, public financial management in Pakistan has, to a certain extent, adopted best practices from OECD countries, South Africa, Australia, Mexico, etc., to produce a gender tagging framework which is used to track the gender application of budgetary allocations and expenditures across the federal and provincial levels. According to Tabadlab's review of documents, ministries are required to classify each cost center according to predefined gender relevance categories, such as education, health, employment, governance, safety, or political participation, and to assign a percentage of the allocation which is deemed gender-related. The Finance Division consolidates these submissions into a gender budget statement, which is on occasion published as part of the federal budget documents. Based on the gender budget statement for the 2025-26 budget, so the previous fiscal year, 9.2% of the current budget and 6.9% of development budget was gender-related. So let this sit for just one moment. In a country that was 148th out of 148 in a gender parity index, less than 7% of its development budget allocations have been tagged as gender relevant. We know that budgets are not neutral. We know that allocation decisions shape access to services, employment, participation, and opportunity. They indicate policy priorities through the allocation of finite resources. This makes the data emerging from gender budgeting a valuable tool for promoting gender equality, if indeed that is a priority. To what extent does Pakistan's gender-responsive budgeting framework influence macro-fiscal priority setting within the federal budget process? That's the question that we will discuss today, and we're very pleased to have an excellent panel with us for this discussion to take place. With that, I'd like to introduce our panelists, please. Dr. Maria Risteska, very happy to have you with us. Dr. Risteska joins us as she's the founder and executive director of the Center for Research and Policy Making, which is a leading think and do tank, not just a think tank, a think and do tank in North Macedonia, and an assistant professor at Southeast European University. She holds a PhD in political science. She has over 20 years of experience in public administrative reform, gender mainstreaming, and gender-responsive budgeting. Maria is also the co-author of the university textbook, Gender-Responsive Budgeting, and editor of Springer's Nature's Gender-Responsive Budgeting in the Southern European context. Very happy to have you with us, Maria.
Happy to be joining you. Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. Our second panelist is Mr. Ali Raza Bhutta. Mr. Bhutta is a career civil servant with 32 years of experience across public finance, energy, and social protection in Pakistan. He's held numerous federal secretary level positions, including secretary at the Ministry of Science and Technology, the Ministry of Human Rights, the Council of Common Interests, the Ministry of Energy's Petroleum Division and Power Division, Poverty Alleviation and Social Safety Division, and I think the list goes on, but I'll stop there. At the provincial level, he served as Secretary of Finance, Energy and Power, and Elementary and Secondary Education in the province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. And earlier, he's managed Punjab's Land Records Reform Project. Mr. Bhutta, very, very happy to have you with us and also have you at the Tabadlab. It's truly is a pleasure.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Mr. Fahad Zafar is an education specialist with 13 years of experience across education research, monitoring, and evaluation. He's done field implementation, data analysis, stakeholder engagement, and program management extensively across various aspects of education. Fahad holds an MPhil in Education Leadership and Management from the Lahore University of Management Science and has worked across large-scale education assignments, including research, surveys, field monitoring, and evidence-based program improvement. At the Tabadlab, Fahad is a senior manager for education, where he has led and managed education data and research assignments, including support to the Pakistan Institute of Education on the Public Financing in Education report. And that is the impetus for today's conversation. Fahad, I'm so happy that you could join. The format for this session will be round robin. So what I'll do is I will pose 4 questions to the panelists, one each. Well, actually 3 questions. One of our panelists was unable to join us. So it'll be 3 questions, one each. And after the first panelist has responded, I will invite other panelists to share their thoughts on that particular question. We hope to make the discussion as fruitful as possible by sharing real-life experiences, successes and failures, and experience of the journey through gender-responsive budgeting towards greater gender equality. So talking about using it as a means to an end and not an end in itself. I would urge you to please keep each of your comments to within 3 to 4 minutes to ensure that we have enough time to go through our questions and hear others' responses to what we have shared. So that all panelists can participate, we will carry the conversation out in English. However, translated subtitles can be added to the recording, so feel free to use Urdu or any other language if it helps better express a particular aspect of your response. Quotations sometimes are often used in Urdu or regional languages, for example, when we're talking here in Pakistan. So my first question is for Mr. Bhutta. Bhutta sir, if I could, I'd like you to frame the discussion a little bit. You have an extensive record with respect to public financial management. Can you share a little bit about what your experience has been with regard to gender responsive budgeting, both at the federal level and at the provincial level, across the various departments that you have led? So we see on paper that something is happening, but it would really be great to hear from the horse's mouth, so to speak, about what is really happening on the ground.
Oh, it's certainly. So where should one start? I think the awareness and at a policy level, a desire to do something about the gender gap in education at all levels started somewhere in the late 80s, early 90s in Pakistan, when it was realized that this is a major problem in the sector. Girls don't have as much access to education at the primary, secondary, and tertiary levels as boys do, although even the access of boys to education was a major issue in those decades. But even then, the gap was significant. So in the 90s, the donors and all the Pakistan provincial governments and the federal government got together to start the social action program. One of the objectives of that program was to try and close the gender gap. In addition to increasing access generally for the at the primary and secondary level, closing the gender gap was also one of the objectives. So starting in the 90s, one started to see adjustments in the provincial budgets, and one started to see development schemes, three kinds of development schemes as far as access to education was concerned. New schools at the three levels, upgradations, and it was realized that even the existing schools do not have sufficient facilities, and some of those facilities do contribute to this gender gap. For example, not having a functioning toilet in the school, not having a boundary wall in the school, actually prevents parents from sending their girls to schools. So one started seeing adjustments in the development budgets of all provinces in the 90s, and even today. I was looking at the development budget of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa this morning, and I saw that even today, when there is a new school scheme or an upgradation scheme, it is specified in the design of the scheme that 30% of those will be for boys and 70% for girls. So that adjustment in the development budgets started happening and continue to happen. Today, at least in one of the provinces, we have been able to close the gender gap to the extent of gross enrollment ratios. That is Punjab, which is half of Pakistan. And there, in fact, at all primary, secondary, and tertiary levels, we have a reverse gap where the GER for the girls is higher than that for the boys. But in all the other three provinces, which is almost the half of the population of Pakistan, as there are still the gender gap still exists in varying degrees at various levels. For example, in Sindh at the secondary level, the gap is about 19%. So 19 the GER for the boys is say 55, and that for girls is 36. So which is again an alarming number both for boys and for girls, but the gap is even more alarming. So that has been the policymakers in the provinces, and by the way, because the education is a provincial subject, federal government did have a role as far as standards and policies are concerned till 2010, but since after 2010, this is a pure provincial subject. So basically, the budgets that we will be talking about in the context of Pakistan will mostly be provincial budgets. So the attempts to correct this at the policy level and adjusting the budgets is one issue. Another one is the ability to track the expenditures, the budgets, and then the expenditures to a particular gender. And in education, given this large gap as far as the girls and boys are concerned, that requires a granular understanding of where where that gap exists, and how public expenditure can address that. I'll just introduce one more concept here, which is in the growth of the education sector in Pakistan, that over the last about two and a half decades, the private sector has taken a lot of a significant amount of responsibility of service service delivery in education. A report by the World Bank published only in March now estimates that 1/3 of the schools in Pakistan are now private, and as many as 49% of the children going to school at the primary and secondary level are going to private schools. And there, the availability of data is not very good. So for the public policymakers and decision makers, that is an additional complication. But I assume we will be talking about that going forward.
Absolutely, Buttasab, thank you. There's several things that have emerged from what you've said. Private sector, the role of the private sector, the granularity of information that's needed, Punjab's sort of curtailing of the gap between boys and girls. Many things I think demand further discussion, and we will hopefully have a chance to return to those aspects of your comments. I'd like now to turn to Dr. Risteska. Maria, you are part of, in fact, you're the regional director, you said, of the Gender Budget Watchdog Network. And I understand that this examines some of the work of the European Parliament as well. Can you talk a little bit about some of your experience from with respect to the adoption and the use, both the adoption but also the use of gender responsive budgeting? And perhaps some of the examples you shared with me yesterday were specifically from North Macedonia. But if you can talk about your role as a watchdog sort of network as well, that would be very helpful.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I have two hats. I represent the Center for Research and Policy Making, from which budget work actually the Gender Budget Watchdog Network has been initiated and launched. But I'm also heading this network of civil society organizations that has started in Western Balkans and Moldova, but has already a global influence. And as you said, we also participate in the debates at EU level on the gender mainstreaming of the next multi-annual financial framework of the European Union. Our central message of the work both of CRPM and the Gender Budget Watchdog Network is that public budgets are never gender neutral, and they determine who receives the services, who gains the opportunities, and whose needs remain invisible. So our work is actually to not just follow the public money, but to assess the real facts and not just assess and criticize, but propose fairer and more effective solutions that respond to the different needs of boys and girls, women and men. The work on gender budgeting is quite personal for me. Before joining the CRPM, I worked as an education portfolio manager of the World Bank in Macedonia. And with that work, I've analyzed a lot of public expenditures in that area. And noticed that although education is fully compulsorily mandated in the country, some groups will be left out. And this should be prevented with better policy designs and better allocation of expenditures. So I'll give you one example from the work in the World Bank. So we've noticed that in the capital city of Skopje and the surrounding villages, there are some ethnic communities of the Turks living in the mountains areas surrounding the capital city Skopje, where the girls have not attended schools and school. So we analyzed what are the reasons. And considering that the reasons were varied, from religious to poverty issues and so on, but one solution would have brought them back to the schooling process just by reallocating, just by redesigning the way how the education as a service has been provided and how it has been funded. The main reason was that the parents were feeling that their girls will be unsafe if they come back from school in the winter period, in the afternoon hours when the light will go dark. The proposal of the redesign of the measure was to not bring the girls into the school in the city of Skopje, but to bring the teachers to the school within the village where they lived. Preventing for them to travel on a bus and making them safe in the winter periods when they were when the day is shorter and it gets darker sooner. This approach of redesigning the policy measures and allocating finances for the different design that responds differently to the needs of girls, boys, women, and men has been taken on by CRPM and the Gender Budget Watchdog Network, which is currently using different watchdog methodologies on analyzing how policies are made, how they are responding to the needs of citizens, and how money has been spent, how money has been spent. Why we are using gender responsive budgeting? Because laws, strategies, and political declarations are not enough. The governments and local governments where education policy especially is being developed and delivered to citizens may promise gender equality, but unless we examine the budget allocations and the actual spending, we cannot know whether these commitments are being implemented. And the budgets are the main policy instruments for implementation. They show us the real priorities, they show us who benefits and who is excluded. So simply just following the money is not sufficient. We have to look at every program from gender perspective and from the needs and interests of the beneficiaries and users, who gains and who loses. This work is especially important for civil society because it transforms monitoring into participation and accountability. It allows to say that this policy design is not fair, how we allocate money is not fair, but also to give constructive proposal on how public resources can be redistributed. So that's from me for the time being.
Thanks a lot, Maria. Thank you so much. You said something that I think really hits the nail on the head, at least for me, which is that the data that emerges from gender responsive budgeting allows you to transform monitoring into participation and accountability. And I think, and you mentioned civil society and the role of civil society. So I think that really hits the nail on the head for how we are looking at this problem. Fahad, you've been looking at this very closely. And so I'd like you to talk about, through this experience that you had with the Pakistan Institute of Education, particularly around the Public Financing and Education report. Can you talk about what you view as the technical and institutional barriers that allow us to link expenditure data with different aggregations, so gender, but also as you talked about the different disaggregations about through religion, ethnic groups, etc. Also disability. So how can we? How does this really work based on the data that you've seen, and how can that be? How, in your view, would that help? Would gender responsive budgeting help solve that problem?
Thank you, Dr. Zainab. I would like to begin by acknowledging that the government of Pakistan, with the support of World Bank, has developed a fairly organized, modern, and I think a very comprehensive financial management system. The financial accounting and budgeting system, commonly known as FABS, is a very valuable platform because it records transactions in real time and uses a very detailed chart of accounts that allows for public expenditure to be analyzed across several parameters. But however, while system is strong from a financial accounting perspective, I think its use for policy analytics is slightly limited by certain gaps in classifications. I think one major limitation is the absence of gender disaggregated data in the FABs. We don't really see that, and that is also reflected in the annual budget statements that are released for public consumption every year. So any user who wants to understand how much is being spent on girls and boys cannot identify through the annual budget statements or the FABs data as such. And this creates a significant information gap when we try to assess how much public financing is actually reaching girls, boys, women, or men. From my experience of working with FABs data over the past 2 years, I have seen that there are also inconsistencies in how existing tags are being applied within the system, especially if we talk about the education sector data that I've analyzed for the past 5 years. For areas such as non-formal education, special education, there are massive inconsistencies in how the data is being recorded within the provinces, across number of years. Some of these inconsistencies are arising because of service delivery structures that are different across provinces. For example, a non-formal education has a separate directorate of Punjab while it falls under the ambit of school education department in Sindh. And similarly for special education, in Balochistan, it's part of the social welfare department, but in Punjab, it's a separate department. So some of the inconsistencies probably arise because of the complex service delivery structures that are in the provinces. However, I also feel that part of the issue also comes from the lack of standardized understanding and application of the classifications within FABs as well. In my experience, the financial classification at the lowest level, such as salary or non-salary expenditure, is usually quite accurate. The challenge emerges when the expenditure has to be linked to a department, subsector, or a policy category. So where the classification is not really obvious, it is oftenly placed under a broader or a less precise tag, and that I think that fuzziness in the data makes it almost impossible to analyze, sometimes at the provincial level, sometimes across provinces as well, and that problem continues when you look at the time series data as well. But I also believe that this is a very manageable problem because it it requires a very clearer definition, stronger tagging protocols, and a very regular training scheme for those who are entering the data. We faced a similar problem within the education data as well, where the provinces were not really producing a very standardized set of variables, and it was very difficult to collate all of that data in one place and analyze it, produce some sort of evidence. Even external reporting or international reporting was also very limited, especially on the SDG 4 goals as well. And also for decision making, it was very limited. So we worked with the governments, we sat with the federal government, we sat with provincial departments as well. We brought all of them together at one platform as well through the technical working group committees that we developed. And I think we sufficiently resolved the discrepancies through the introduction of a data standardization framework that we developed, and now that is being adopted and used by all the provinces in the education and data space. And I think a similar kind of intervention for this financing data that can actually standardize whatever the users are thinking about a particular invoice or a particular entry. So they just need to have a very standardized kind of understanding of how and where this particular entry needs to be logged in or tagged by. I think in FABS, the people who are entering the data in the system understand the financial procedures very well, but I feel like through the data set that I've skimmed, I feel like the sectoral knowledge that they need to have is probably missing. So someone from the education space, working in the financing data, working in the education financing data, does not really understand education bit of that particular data, and similarly for health and infrastructure as well, and for other areas. So I feel like improving this would significantly enhance the value of FABs data, that especially from the lens of gender responsive and sectors specific analysis. I'll stop here, and if there's any more comments, I'll just answer and continue.
Thanks a lot, Fahad. That's really interesting. And I'm going to quickly turn to Bhutta Saab and Maria, because what Fahad has said, I think I would really like to hear your views on that, right? In two ways. And I have specific follow-on questions from Fahad's statements for both of you. Maria, if I could start with you. Fahad talked about three specific areas. So we have the FABS information system, which is generating budgetary data, but it's not sufficiently tagged to allow us to derive gender disaggregations or gender categorizations. Have you seen this in your experience? Yesterday, when we had an intro call, you talked a little bit about the capacity building work that you have done. And is this sort of part of the journey that you have viewed in other contexts as well?
Thank you. It's what you're experiencing is actually very common across also Europe and other regions where I have worked on gender budgeting. I think that the essence of gender budgeting is that it is analytical tool. So it has to rely on gender analysis, and this gender analysis should be shared and known and be aware of by everyone in the policy and the budget cycle. So the best way how to inform the budget indicators that are entered in the system is by working together between the education specialists. For example, if we talk about education budget and the education budget specialists, and if possible, an institution or analytical capacity on the gender perspective could be added to it. I think from all of the examples around the world, the best one I really like is the Spanish experience, where the budget office in the Ministry of Finance is working together with the Institute of Women on the first prioritization of the areas where the Institute of Women is determining the gender gaps. Then the Ministry of Finance is asking institutions, the budget users, to develop different measures and budget programs that would fill in those gaps. And then the budget officers are entering the information on the budget spending and the indicators, which are in essence gender indicators, measuring the progress of the gaps that need to be filled in and are determined by the Institute of Women. Worldwide, I think these budget statements that you also have in Pakistan are the good mechanism, instrument, tool to be used if they are structured in a way and provide a gender analysis of the impact of the policy measure and the budget allocated to it to bridge the gap, the gender gap that for which the policy measure has been developed and adopted. This is not always easy to do, especially because it requires very good coordination. And usually the institutional coordination and the capacity is the weakest point. The other weakest point that we have observed is the very execution of the budget. It's not just being planned, the money being planned to be spent, but whether they are actually executed to prove to prove the results that we intend to achieve. Therefore, we are focusing as Gender Budget Watchdog Network very much on capacity building. We have developed one very important online platform, our eGBWN Academy, which is providing training in gender responsive budgeting, in the different methodologies that we have developed, from resilience to climate change financing, for policy advocacy, especially for CSOs, and negotiations, and participating at international policy events and using them to hold governments accountable. But we think that just providing capacity building is not enough, that there should be also mentoring support, and as well as creating one community of practice through which organizations, experts, and the whole epistemic community, including business, academia, and so on, can network and exchange. We therefore have established this community of practice that connects civil society with academia, governments, development partners, and organize conferences, thematic workshops, webinars. We produce these books that you just mentioned at the beginning of when you presented me. And for civil society, it's also important to also provide funding to apply the tools and the knowledge that they have gained through the capacity building. So our approach is also by providing some small grants that fund the gender budget initiatives of civil society, and demonstrating that they can be also partners of governments in providing for such needed policy analysis, gender policy analysis that can feed in and inform these public finance information systems that you talked about.
Thank you, Maria. The very valuable input from your side about the experiences that others have had in this journey. Gupta Saab, lots of questions for you. I don't need to put you on the spot, but I might, just a little bit. So, Fahad, basically both Maria and Fahad have said some very interesting things. And at the rock bottom of all of those comes the question of will and priority, which I highlighted earlier, and capacity. So there are these three things that I think circulate around the state's response to, I'm just going to say gender equality, and there are its various facets. Fahad, for example, said that FABS data is there, but the utilization, the usability of that data is not to the extent that we would need for it to be. And Maria talked about a situation where a network or a civil society organization is working closely with the government to provide capacity building, to provide that sort of participatory lens to examine how policies are being developed and their implications. From you, I would simply ask, to what extent are we doing this? And what is preventing us from doing it more? And if you have any examples to share in that regard, I'd be grateful.
Absolutely. Maria made a statement twice, which I love. She said that budgets are the strongest policy instruments. Now, for these instruments to work to achieve policy goals, you're right. There has to be a will, and let me show you that there is no dearth of that. But this instrument then has to be very precise. And for the instrument to be precise, we earlier mentioned the idea of granularity. Now, after the 2023 census, we know down to the village level how many children, and it is an embarrassingly big number, in every village, in the rural areas, or every ward in the urban areas, how many school-age children are actually not in school. This is census data, the most reliable data set possible. Now, I will not go into the question of the dispute that each of the provincial governments raises about that number not being as large as the census says. But even if it is half of what it is 12.5 million children of school-going age. We know with as much granularity as possible where those children are. We also have a very good data sets, as Fahad was saying, and standardized data sets in all provinces in their education management information systems. We have a very good data set in FABS where we know how much we are spending. Now, there are gaps there. The gender tagging exercises that we have done with the assistance from World Bank and FCTO, and those have cover some space, but not go far enough because of a simple reason. For us to know how much we are spending on the girls' education and how much on boys, and I will ignore the small number of mixed schools here. It should be easy to see how much is being spent on girls' schools and how much on boys' schools. It is not, given the structure of FABS, as Fahad was mentioning. Two very important things have happened recently. Sindh and Balochistan, they declared every school a cost center. And that means that now they know, at least to the extent of non-salary expenditure, how much is being spent in each school. There was a problem even with that. Even after doing that, because of the problem that Fahad was mentioning, non-standardized data entry, there were different kinds of nomenclature used to define boys and girls schools or even mixed schools. So any data entry operator, whatever is the piece of paper in front of him, he puts in that. And so a government girls primary school can be a GGPS or a government GPS or a G girls primary school or whatever. So it was in a data set as large as 40,000, one had to do eyeballing, and even then one didn't know whether that data entry is correct. So a very important thing that has happened only this year in the budget that was passed in June by Balochistan and Sindh assemblies. They have linked each cost center to their EMIS code. Now, there is the Education Management Information System database, and there is this expenditure database, and the codes in both the systems have now been linked. And with only this small adjustment, now we know, at least for the non-salary budget, how much is being spent in each school. Teacher salaries are still not accounted for in those cost centers, but that is a simple correction that can be done. Balochistan has even gone further. They have also allocated the salaries to each of these cost centers. Now, it is possible in Punjab and KP to do that analysis, but it will be a complex. You will have to make a number of assumptions. You will have to collate the data in various databases. But these are developments that are happening. With this, we should be able to know that where the girls are still finding it difficult to access schools. Maria mentioned the distance school and having to travel in hot or cold weather as being a barrier. It is definitely a barrier. But in order to do that, the policymaker, the designer of the budget needs to know where the money is needed, number one. Number two, or with time series analysis, how and where the money is most effectively spent. So it is possible that I target my budget to an area where the private sector is already taking care of the excess issue, and there will not be as much bang for the buck as say in a distant rural area. So that kind of decision making with better data sets and with integration of those data sets will be possible. A major gap that we have to address, which I mentioned earlier as well, that we do not do private school censuses, but as there are now with artificial intelligence and machine learning, there are ways of estimating that better. That needs to go into the decision making too. I don't know whether I've addressed your question or not, but these were things that came to my mind when Maria and Fahad was.
Thanks, Bhutta Saab. The private school debate is I think we need to have another Tabadlab Policy Roundtable on the role of the private sector. It's something that we often in our corridors are either ranting about, yelling about, screaming about, or just having a civilized conversation about it. But it would be very nice to discuss that in greater detail.
It's something. I think that we should also talk about not just the planning the budget, but also executing and assessing the impact, especially how the money that we are allocating are being used, and how that what affects on educational results or in economic growth, depending, or on overall development of the country, depending on what angle we want to achieve. And I think that we should maybe single out one very good practice by the Italian Parliament, which is adopting every year not just an account, final account of the budget, but also an impact report on the gender impact of the budget. And this is also a tool which allows us to see what are the not just intended but actual results that we can achieve by using gender responsive budgeting.
Thanks, Maria. And that brings us to another very important point, right? Which is what is the role of civil society in this, and what is the role of the state? So I understand the data is held by the state, and there's various, classification systems and processes that either the finance division or in collaboration with the different departments, others can put together. But this is all happening on the side of the state. The civil society has a role in which we want to participate in this decision making. We want to look at both the policy making, but also the impact of the policy. But in Italy's example that you just mentioned, you said the government actually calls for this. The government calls for this, you said the assessment of gender impact. To my knowledge, our government has not called for anything like this. Bhutta Saab or Fahad, are you aware of any initiatives that are taking place in collaboration between, and on the behest of the state? Is the state, does it, the will is there, as Bhutta Saab has clarified, but is the appetite there, and is that, have there been such partnerships taking place?
Fahad, allow me to go first on this. The role of the society itself is critical. It is public resources that are being spent. And Maria, when I was mentioning FABS, it is the execution. It becomes possible to look at how well or bad the execution of that budget was, because the FAB system that does capture expenditures also, and that is why one can look back at the effectiveness if one develops effective good enough time series of those expenditures. The society's role becomes important with dissemination of information. So one of the things that the government did in KP about 10 years ago, and then Punjab and Sindh also did this, was to with the technology that they had at that time, based outside every school, a board with information on what the government is spending on this school. How many teachers are there? I mean, it was not the budget itself, but how many teachers are there, what the facilities are, and what non-salary budget is coming to that school. That information, in addition to other monitoring information that the provincial governments collect, and they have very elaborate monitoring systems now, was made public. Now the expectation then is that the parents whose children are coming to that school, the residents of that area, will become aware of that information and will then push for changes where they are required. Another instrument that has been in place in all provinces is the officially mandated parent-teacher councils in each school. Now,
Bhutta
how
Saab,
well?
sorry to cut you off, but to what extent did that actually happen in KP? If that was the expectation, to what extent did it actually take place?
The entire data was actually put on the online, as to the extent that it was available. Remember that they still don't have cost centers allocated to the schools, but to the extent that the data was available, it was those boards were erected outside every school. They continue to be there. The information does is keeping posted there, but the response, the public awareness, and your question was about the role of the civil society. Now that is the role of the organizations in that local area, to make the people aware and then advocate for and lobby for changes, increases, or reallocations of resources that are required. That did not happen, has not happened so far, and that is another issue in education policy, whether education should be managed from provincial capitals, where 40,000 to 50,000 schools each province has, how effective that is, or should it be done at the local level, at the tehsil and district
Right. Right. Fahad, so you've the same question goes to you. What is the role? What is for the civil society? As Bhutta Saab said, where are we? Where are the gaps that that where we are falling short? As sort of in our role to kind of complement what the state is doing, and also just when you were looking at the at the education financing data, and you faced hurdles with respect to FABs and also the PI databases, what were the other databases that you used to complement what you already had? So, how did you circumvent the problem that you faced when you were doing this work?
Thank you, Dr. Zainab. I'll start with the second section of your question. I think the data sets that were available to us were not really integrated enough for us to have any kind of meaningful interrelation or correlation between the information. But I think the opportunity lies in connecting the financing data with the sectoral data set that already exists. So what we did was to try to connect EMIS information or education information data set with the financing data set and complement some of the trends from education data with the financing data to see if anything made sense. But then again, what Bhutta Sahab said earlier is that the direct connection is very difficult because the integration of the data sets is not as such, especially for KP, especially for the data set that we are working in now that Sindh and Balochistan have stepped up and did some sort of work in that particular segment. So in the future, we expect that mostly the data set would be in a form that would be more useful to us. More importantly, if we can link school information with financing, we can introduce a much more stronger gender lens into public expenditure analysis as well. Schools are already classified as boys, girls, mixed schools. We have already data on enrollment, how many female teachers, male teachers are there. Connecting this with the budget and expenditure data would allow policymakers to assess whether resources are being distributed adequately, efficiently, or equitably between boys and girls as well. Alongside that, this integration can become even more powerful if the learning outcomes data is also connected somehow. We have ASR data, we have NAT data. If I would love to see all of these data sets connected together. I think being a data geek, I get very excited when there is a dialogue on integrating data sets. So I start fantasizing about the world of perfect data and considering that if possible, on top of all data sets that I've already mentioned, if population and housing census data is also integrated, that we try to integrate in our exercise as well, our government would be in a much more better position to plan for, I think, two of the biggest pain points. One has already been pointed out by Bhutta, that is the out of school children and planning for out of school children. And the second one that I feel is important is the younger children who are actually going to enter into the system in the coming years as well. So we need to plan for that as well. Coming back to your question about the role of civil society organizations, I think some of the work that we already do is part of stuff that we are trying to so some of the work that we are already doing in the education space is connected to the advocacy on how gender responsive budgeting is important. Especially Malala Fund is one of the organizations that is particularly working in this domain for almost 10, 12 years now. We have been part of that campaign for almost 3 years now. They have started funding different local level organizations to impart or advocate on improving the girls' education financing and ensuring that some of the things that were probably overlooked in the budget statements are not really overlooked in the next budget statements that are going to come up. So that to continue debating and keeping the discourse alive on this matter. But then most of the stuff that we do, the most of the energy that we um, uh, uh, consume or use is on creating awareness to the public, because all of this financing data, education data, it's a very technical thing and most of it is not readily available for public consumption. So people are not really aware. When we were analyzing the data on financing and education, we also saw that although education financing was very limited, most of a portion of the data was also unutilized as well. So I think across different provinces, the percentage of utilized budget of education is around 90 to 95%. So even when you have limited resources in financing, you are still not making 100% use of whatever is available to you as well, and that information is not really readily available because that requires expenditure, the correlation between expenditure and allocated financing data. So all of that is a little technical, not really readily available. The bottom up accountability requires some sort of input from the civil society organizations. They are doing that bit, but then the cohort of people who are trying to do this is not as big as it should be, and people are not really very adept with the concept of how to analyze all of these and how to consume all of this information and the longitudinal, especially the concept of the information that we are throwing out is that 0.8 percentage of GDP is being spent on education, but actually that 0.8% is a very small portion of it's not really a complete year as well. One and other, and the second thing that Bhutta Saab also said about the private school system, that does not capture the investment that is being done in the private sector as well. So overall, the number could be very high. The number could be relatively very higher as well. So I feel like that some of these integrations in amongst the data sets could help us analyze better, inform the policymakers better, and then eventually have I think more improved financing in education especially for girls.
I think that government, the global standards for expenditure, state expenditure on education typically do not include private expenditure. So I don't think we can use that in our defense of the 0.8%. Not sure that a 0.8% can be defended in any way. But in any case, I think that the private school question definitely does merit closer examination. I think that there's a lot to be said about the role of civil society and how we can take this further. From Tabadlab's point of view, I know that there are specific elements of our research and evidence that we try to package into, Instagram posts or TikTok or some type of digestible format so that young people or different advocates can take those facts and use them for a wider accountability. And we have many like us are doing the same, and we do sometimes see some traction on some of these. I just don't think it's at the scale where it needs to be given a country of this size. And it would be interesting to hear, Maria, about any experience that you've had on strengthening the role of the civil society, not just of those who are preparing the budgets, but actually on civil society to be able to use the data that comes out of gender responsive budgeting, not just for education, but also for something like labor force participation, for example, advocating for equality on different facets. Can you think about, and I'm sorry again putting you on the spot this time, but can you think about an example where this has been done, either tried and failed or tried and succeeded?
CRPM and the Gender Budget Watchdog Network have many experiences of analyzing using the gender responsive budgeting tools in different areas. This is the beauty of this toolbox, actually, that it can be applied from labor force to climate change to disaster relief response to transport, energy efficiency, all of the everything that you can think of can be applicable for gender budget analysis and can contribute to better, more effective and more efficient policy design that has a better gender equality, that ensures better gender equality results. To come back to your question about civil society role, I think that our work has proven that civil society can improve transparency of the budgeting process. For example, we, as a Gender Budget Watchdog Network, have produced citizens' gender budgets as documents that allow for citizens to be informed what is the gender budget of our governments, where the network is operating. And also, we are providing budget commentaries every year when the budget cycle, the budget is being prepared and discussed in the parliament in order to contribute to the debates in the parliament and improve the allocation, the gender responsive allocation of the public expenditures. The civil society can provide a better can provide for the budgets to be more intersectional. So looking at the educational budget only from a gender perspective is not enough. Our experience shows that we can use gender responsive budgeting analysis of disability, of transport, of how menstrual products are being taxed and provided to improve educational results. So the intersectionality that is an advantage of civil society work, because they represent the different interests and needs of the society and can voice these needs better in the budgeting process. By improving their participation in the budgeting process, we are also contributing to the democratization of the policymaking and the budgeting process. And finally, by building capacities of CSOs to monitor, we are not just increasing their technical expertise on how to measure indicators, how to analyze budgets, how to create easy, understandable tables and reports to inform citizens on the impact of public expenditures on their lives and overall equality in the society. We are also, as CSOs, are crucial because we are using storytelling to this evidence, because evidence does not change policy by itself. We are the agents that explain the numbers and what the numbers mean in people's lives. For a woman, providing unpaid care, for a girl without access to sports, for a patient waiting for preventive health services, or for a family affected by unequal access to public transport. The power also of the network is very important. So this is the reason why we actually established the Gender Budget Watchdog Network, because we learned that as individual CSOs, when we do monitoring, we are not so effective. But if we can create a collective regional influence in Europe, in Asia, in Africa, if we can put the countries to compare themselves, to create an environment of peer pressure, that someone is doing something more and is actually having better equality results based on the policies they have adopted, makes overall also public spending and policies more effective and more efficient. So by our approach, the Gender Budget Watchdog approach is a community approach, building a community that is capable to turning budget evidence into meaningful and sustainable policy change.
Thanks, Marianne. Our experience in Pakistan with women's rights organizations has been similar, particularly through the 80s and 90s, but also more recently about how regional networks can be very effective, particularly around women's rights issues. I have one last question for Bhutta Saab. The production team is telling me that we're running out of time, and I promise that we will wrap up very quickly. I'll give you all some space to make any comments that you'd like to make at the end. But my last question for Bhutta Saab, please, if you'll bear with me. Bhutta Saab, at the beginning, you mentioned something about how Punjab has managed to rectify or remove gaps between the gross enrollment ratio for boys and girls for primary schools. And I'm sure you knew that I would come back to this at some point. So, can you just tell us a little bit about why you think, or to what extent this has been, or this success has been facilitated through budgetary practices and through a better understanding of allocations and expenditures? Has that contributed to this success, or would you credit another aspect of policy implementation or something else?
This might have because Punjab overall has better resources, one, and better budget preparation and execution capacities compared to all the other provinces. But I think the credit goes more to other governance practices than to budgetary adjustments and budgetary practices. Because Punjab has seen, and we've seen with Sir Michael Barber's book as well, their approach of developing delivery roadmaps. And they did that mostly in education for the longest time in education. And I think that is so the top executive in the province taking stock of specified governance issues like teacher absenteeism, like student absenteeism, has contributed the most, and the robust monitoring arrangements which Punjab pioneered, and then actually all the other provinces have then replicated those also. But so my view, that is the best one. But if you allow me very quickly a comment on the 0.8% that the public sector spends on education. So that is indefensible. It has to increase, and there are multiple reasons behind that. More money needs to go into education, but the money that is going there needs to be spent well as well. So as far as public financial management in the education sector is concerned, it will definitely help. And forgive me for coming back again to the private education thing. Us, the government, not knowing fully where the private schools are, who they are teaching, how they are doing that, is a major gap, and it affects also the government's ability to direct its resources more productive. Sorry for this digression.
Absolutely. No, it's a critical question, and I think Bhutta Saab is calling for another Tabadlab Policy Roundtable on this topic. So absolutely, thank you very much, Maria, Fahad, Bhutta Saab. If there's anything that you would like to close with, please share that now. Otherwise, I'm going to close this session with immense thanks to each of you. Any closing remarks? Okay.
Nothing from my.
Maybe I can start. So I just wanted to thank you for the invitation and to say that the Gender Budget Watchdog Network has grew from the CRPM budget work, but since 2024, the network opened itself globally. So we think that gender responsive budgeting can be replicated, and the tools that we are using in different countries by different institutions and in different policy areas. So I invite everyone who is listening in to join our network.
Thanks a lot, Maria. Bhutta Saab and Fahad.
Just very quickly, we mentioned will at the policy making level earlier. So I would like to repeat that that there is no dearth of that. There is a dearth of resources, and there is a dearth of evidence to take better decisions. So I think that is a job for people like the Tabadlab to help the governments design systems where decisions are based more on evidence and evidence of where the need lies and what brings better results.
Absolutely, Bhutta Saab. We do have our work cut out for us. Fahad?
I think I'll accept the challenge that is being thrown to us by Bhutta Saab, so we will keep at it what we are doing. I think the evidence that the way that we present evidence is, I think, very useful. What I have experienced is that we don't really complicate the information that is being thrown out to the public. We actually make sure that it is shared in a way that is very absorbable and consumable for the users. So I think we are going to continue doing that, and hopefully we are going to connect with Bhutta Saab in the recent future, and then continue working on some of the objectives around gender responsive budgeting, and hopefully that are going to reap fruitful returns in the foreseeable future, inshallah. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Fahad. Thank you to all our panelists. I think that budgets are a fantastic instrument of implementation of policy and realization of the will that we have amongst our policymakers. Within a finite resource environment, this question becomes even more important. It's not just a question of investing more as a problem, but actually using the money using the resources in a more efficient and effective manner. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to all our panelists. And thank you very much to the production team, which has done a fantastic job facilitating this whole exercise. And with that, thank you to our listeners, and Khuda Hafiz.